You can have the best inventory, and if your team is not well-versed in being able to sell that, does you know darn good. Same thing with marketing. You can have a great marketing plan. You can be super authentic, but if you don't have a great team to back it up, once your patient gets into your office, they're going to be like, okay, well, these are a bunch of ding-dongs running this place, right? So back to your original question, what is the biggest issue? The biggest issue is training. And it doesn't just have to do with licensure or certification. Training as far as giving everyone the key factors and being successful in this industry.
Welcome to The Focused View, the podcast for eye care professionals across Australia. Brought to you by Opticare. In each episode, we bring together leading eye care, optical and business professionals to share valuable insights, practical tips, and the latest trends shaping the optical business landscape. I'm your host, Michael Nasser, and together we'll explore innovative strategies for practice growth, patient care, and business success in the eye care industry. Whether you're starting your career, managing a practice, or just looking to stay ahead of the field, The Focused View is your source for inspiration and knowledge. Kayla, welcome to the show today.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm just as excited, if not more excited, to have you on the show. So, but I guess to get it going, can you give us a bit of a background as to your journey, who you are, your background, and what you do?
Yes, certainly. Well, I work in this beautiful optical industry that we're all in. And I started out in the optical industry about 17, almost 18 years ago, and started working front desk at an independent optical here in the States in a city called Nampa, Idaho. It's kind of off the beaten path. And I was finishing up school at Boise State and going for like business and marketing. And I'm a huge numbers dork, like big time numbers nerd right here. So I get into the optical industry and working front desk, and the opticians are like, hey, you're selling more from the front desk than we typically are back here. Like, come back here. We'll teach you the ways to be an optician. And I was like, yes, I'm totally in. I was lucky enough that I approached my doctors. I was working for two brothers at the time. I approached them and I said, hey, docs, do you realize how much money you're leaving on the table? And again, super lucky, because a lot of doctors would be like, who are you telling me what to do? But I was really lucky because they ended up going, well, show us what you got. And I basically pulled out these spreadsheets on running their inventory. And they said, well, go ahead and give it a shot. Let's see. And a few months later, they came to me and they said, hey, whatever it is that you're doing, keep it up. And I was like, yeah. So that basically evolved into working with a few other practices, then kind of running more of a consulting thing, because it turns out I have a knack for teaching as well. Mm-hmm. And then that ultimately evolved into public speaking, where I was creating a bunch of CEs and delivering those all across the US and Canada. And then I started, going into these offices, and I thought, you know what? It would be, whether offices are very big and large and successful or very small, maybe, and just starting out, they all have the same issues. I'm teaching them all the same things. So how about I take all my trainings and I put it on an online platform so that everyone can access it. All independent optometrists can access it, and their teams. And so that was how we created Spexy. And then we took that original kind of numbers nerd Excel spreadsheet awesomeness and developed it into a platform where offices can enter in their retail inventory and be able to optimize the retail inventory based upon their own unique numbers at their offices. So it's pretty great. So Spexy has now grown to be very large, and we are very blessed. And that's how I met you.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and for context, I was in New York this year. This will probably air in 2025. So yeah, we're recording in 2024. So earlier this year, and you were doing a talk on marketing, and I, if I remember correctly, one of the take-home messages was how marketing needs to be authentic, and so often marketing for optometry practices are not authentic because they outsource it. And a lot of what you were saying was it needs to be internal. So I was a good student. I was listening, and I guess that's one of the issues, because the other thing that I've come to learn as I've seen Spexy, and I've known some people that have gone through the program too. You spoke about your journey when you're working in different optometry practices and seeing the same issues. And you've touched on inventory, and obviously marketing is another one. What was the first thing that you saw being a problem? Again, is it the inventory side of things? Where do independent practices you see have the most challenges to begin with?
Great question. First thing is training. That's it. That's the biggest one. There's a lot of other opportunities in inventory, in marketing and things like that. But the reality is you can have the best inventory. And if your team is not well-versed in being able to sell that, does you know darn good. Same thing with marketing. You can have a great marketing plan. You can be super authentic. And I think we're going to talk about a few of those things in here. But if you don't have a great team to back it up, once your patient gets into your office, they're going to be like, okay, well, these are a bunch of ding-dongs running this place, right? And so with optometry as a whole, many of the independent optical community it's all small business run, right? So in optometry, it's much harder to find good people. And then once you find a good person, it's much harder to be able to give them the proper amount of training that they should have. Now, here in the States, we have some, regulated states that have a licensure for opticianry, but most of them do not. And I believe it's very similar in Australia, where there is not a required licensure. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right. To be an optical dispenser. So I think you refer to them as opticians. Yes. We refer to them as optical dispensers. Optical dispensers, it's not a regulated industry. So effectively anyone can be a dispenser or call themselves a dispenser. Although there is a course, it is optional. It doesn't have to be taken.
Yes. And so when I did mine, my state does not require it. And so because it's optional, I was like, yeah, I want to do it, of course. And I went through all of the training, the certifications. I am certified, all that funness. But the reality is that it doesn't, speaking from someone who works in all 50 states, it matters as far as your technical training, right? So you can have a little bit more regulation there. But in the most part, there are offices that are full of licensed and certified dispensers that are full of non-licensed, non-certified dispensers. And sometimes the non-licensed, non-certified are better performers overall than the others. And not all the time, but there is no, in my professional circumstances, not just opinion, I have data to back this stuff up. The reality is that licensed or not licensed, there needs to be a standard of understanding and being able to have access to a lot of information that makes independent optical successful. And that, in my opinion, is the biggest problem with being able to have success amongst all independent practices. So back to your original question, what is the biggest issue? The biggest issue is training. And it doesn't just have to do with licensure or certification. Training as far as giving everyone the key factors and being successful in this industry. Because so much of our industry is taught upon kind of this whole, learn from your predecessor kind of thing, which is good. There's a lot that we need to learn that's hands-on. But the reality is that in this small business scenario that many of our opticals are running on, let's just say that your optical should be running with 5 people, whether you have a new optician or optical dispenser coming on or optician coming on, or whether you've lost someone, because that happens, right? There's some turnover. The reality is that in your optical, when you have someone that you're bringing on, you're going to hire them. The truth is that you're going to take your best person off the sales floor to go and train them, right? Now, this is what happens. Even if you've got the best team, your office should be running with 5 people. And now you're down to 3 people that is running while you're doing the training. So the problem is that one of 2 things are going to happen. Number one is that trainer is going to not give the best training that they would like to give, maybe the new person. And so because they have to get back to the rest of the staff to help run patient care. And so what happens is you've got a newbie who doesn't know a whole lot. And it's kind of like push them off the boat and see if they sink or swim. Right? So like that's kind of what you run into. The other alternative is that maybe you have a very dedicated trainer who is helping out this new person. But the reality is that it's putting too much strain on the rest of the team. And the team is going to end up getting, totally burnt out, totally overwhelmed, and they're going to end up leaving you, which is a total bummer. So then you're back in the same boat of hiring again. And so a consistent thing that we found amongst all of the independent opticals, again, large or small, is making sure that there's a resource that you can have a new trainer bring somebody on to the optical. They can use this resource to watch these trainings, to give them the verbiage and overall understanding, and then go to the trainer for the training So that trainer will come off the sales floor for an hour, maybe 2 hours a day to give them that one-on-one, hands-on, follow me around kind of training. So it allows the independent optical to be able to fully function while this new person becomes a very contributing part of the team. And so that's what we found is overall the most important need amongst all independent opticals. So that's why we created it.
Well, I mean, I think training there, and I've got so many questions that run through my mind as you're saying these things, so it's hard for me to keep a list of it all. But you indicated that in your state where you practice in the US, it's not a requirement to do the actual official course to be a dispenser or an optician, but training is critical. Can you speak to the difference between, say, I guess the official technical training, but the training that I see Spexy do, and if you want to speak more about Spexy as part of the answer and how it does this, it's more about the practicality of being in the store and so often you hear people, there's a theoretical side of things, but there's also a practicality side of things, and training that's with the usual institutes, and it's not to speak down on them. It's just they're very much focused. They're more about ticking the boxes to get the requirements to fulfill the needs of the particular certificate, so that but there is this practicality side of things. And I feel like Spexy speaks more to that. So how do you distinguish between those two types of training? And I guess what are the importance and relevance of them either? And how does Spexy, I guess, tackle that?
Great question. So you're very correct in the fact that there is a large discrepancy between what we train on and what is trained in a typical institution training type, a certification type opportunity. I would consider those more technical. And ours, if I had to just put labels on both, which is not just those things, but the biggest labels would be, theirs would be more technical. Mine would be more lifestyle and sales. Okay. So the problem that we often run into is there are opticals that will hire great opticians, like the most technically trained. We have a master certification in opticianry. That's a nationwide certification. It is hard. It takes a lot of brains. So you can't be a ding dong getting in there and understanding, getting that certification. And it's a beautiful program. But I have seen master opticians that know their craft. Man, they can calculate decentration like nobody's business. They can, find the best. And, some of them are very good with the technical fits, but they can't sell a damn thing.
Yeah.
So the reality is to be able to equip these people with the knowledge that's necessary, not necessarily the master opticians, because they've already got this much knowledge. I will equip them with the knowledge that is necessary to be successful and to understand the foundations of optics. And in teaching that, I also teach the verbiage and communication skills that go along with being able to sell to your patients. Because the reality is that many opticians and optometrists alike run into this conflict that they don't want to come off as like a snake oil salesman, right? You don't want to be too salesy. You don't want to look too pushy. And the reality is that if you think back on all of the medical professions, right? All of the doctorates and whatnot that are out there. If you think back to all of those, what is the only medical profession that has retail sales that's even close to ours? Is there one? There's not. No. Like dentistry can get a little bit close, but that's more cosmetic, not retail, right? We actually have a retail product. And so the reality is that we're releasing all these optometrists and all these opticians from their training and their schooling with this understanding of, here's how to be a doctor, here's how to be an optometrist, here's how to be an optician, here's how to know your craft and your trade. Yet there are 0 classes taught on sales. 0. So is that the same where you are?
Absolutely. And what I was going to say is between 60 and 70% of the revenue of a practice comes from the retail of the business, not the clinical side.
Absolutely.
And that's, I guess, what you're speaking about there. And it's the same here.
That's exactly right. Yes, a vast majority, usually it's around 60%, comes from the retail side. Yet we're released out into the wild to run our practices without any knowledge of how to run sales. And this goes both for opticianry or optical dispensers and optometrists. And so the reality is, if you don't know what you're doing in life, if you don't know what you're doing, some of us kind of have the mindset of like, fake it till you make it kind of thing, right? Well, the reality is when you're faking it till you make it, you end up having a little bit of confrontational, maybe, approach to it, where you will come up to it and you'll try and be confident and you'll try and say these things. But in all reality, you're coming off as kind of a snake oil salesman. Or sometimes you get the pushback from the patient and then you go, okay, next time I'm going to tread a little lighter. Next time I'm going to do this. And what happens is it ends up coming back to doctors going, I don't like selling. Optometrists going, I don't like selling. And opticians going, I don't like selling. I don't want to sell. I just want to, be there to help my patient and to educate my patient. Listen, y'all, if they're buying it, you're selling it. So you need to know how to sell. And so that's one thing, back to our original premise, that's one thing that is very different about what we train is we equip all of our members with the idea of understanding what the importance of and knowing the proper verbiage and knowing the proper way to communicate with your patient non-verbally to help to influence these things so you don't come off rather, pushy, right?
Yeah.
When in all reality, if you're taught this trade, you don't have to do a fake it till you make it kind of thing. And the greatest thing is even if you've been faking it for 15 years without having any real sales and communication training, there's no better time than now to learn it. And so that's what's really great is it's something that can be learned.
But I guess with Spexy and with the way that you're training and the experience that you've had, it's more structured. But can you talk to me about the importance of structured training in practice and I guess the benefit that has as opposed to the more ad hoc, which I'm sure the smaller independent practices do? And what's the difference? And I guess how can a practice be better at that?
Yes, very good question. Back to the opportunity or the, I guess, common issue that we run into in independent practices where we're a small business, right? The reality is most small businesses don't have a training plan. They don't have a training structure. It is, Mary is the best optician that we have. She's really great. Here's our office manual. Here are our policies. This is typically how we do things. Now follow me around and I'm going to teach you how we do our day to day. And the reality is that is necessary in our industry. However, in doing that, we don't realize how much is actually missed in the foundational knowledge of why the heck we do what we do. So with the importance of the structured training, especially the way that we have it set up, is to set it up in a way that the new hire can be a contributing part of the team as quickly as possible, right? So in many scenarios, there are a boatload of crazy ideas of how people train people.
Yeah.
But a lot of offices will say, yeah, I'm going to let them follow me for 3 weeks. And then we're going to let them start doing X. And then we're going to let them start doing Y. And then we're going to let them start doing Z. And maybe they're not really good at Z. So we're going to come back to there's a whole bunch of different variations without a real standard of let's learn this first. Let's learn this second. Let's learn this third. And so when you have a structured training process that you're going through, it allows for not only, like we mentioned earlier, for the example with the 5 team members, and you take the best one off the sales floor to teach the newbie. The idea with having this structured level of training is that, they can learn how to, answer the phones, check in orders, be able to assess an order. But then maybe they don't need to know how to do lensometry right away. Obviously, they don't need to know how to do, position of wear measurements for multifocals. They don't need to know how to do a lot of these things right away. So what we've done in our Spexy 101 course is we've laid out a template of the skills to build on, right? To make them a contributing part of the team. Because if you're sitting there starting with, okay, here are frames, here's how we do frame fit, here's how we calculate decentration, here's what we want, here's what you don't want when it comes to frame fit, and they don't know how to answer the darn phone, or they don't know why we do what we do, that's a problem. Now, I'm gonna highlight that part really quick because there are many, many, many tenured opticians that have come to Spexy and they have said, and I've gotten emails from the managers and everything else saying, hey, I was trained by my predecessor, which a lot of us are, right? It's a very copy of a copy kind of system, right? I was trained by my predecessor. I've been doing this for 15 years and I had no idea that is why we did X or that's why we did Y. They have no idea. They just do it just because that's how they've been told to do things. But the reality is if you give the optometric field, not just opticians, I'm saying optometrists too. We have optometrists go for our Spexy 101 course because they're like, oh, because you're taught a lot on what to do back behind the phoropter and a lot of what to do back, in the slit lamp and all these different things. But But seeing how it actually comes to fruition with a pair of glasses, like doctors like, I had no idea. I just write down the prescription and I know you know what I mean? So to be able to have that basic foundational understanding that's not skipped over, that you know that when they went through this certain level of structured training that they got this knowledge, it's something that's very, very powerful. So it allows for your team to not only be, let's just say, well-versed in the day-to-day, but as far as when it comes to troubleshooting different issues, they know why, they know why they take this measurement. They know why vertexis is important. They know why, the eye shape has an effect on, the different parts of the prescription. They know all of that. Where a typical, if you're just teaching them the step-by-step skills of here's how you take a measurement and here's how you do this, and not really the whole foundation of why it is we do what we do, which makes it really hard for them to be able to troubleshoot with the patient issues going forward. Example, it was this last Vision Expo in Vegas. I got an email from an optometrist who has 3 doctors at his location. So he's the 4th, and they are very good about their office trainings, and they have office trainings and office meetings once a month. And then they have like weekly check-ins, and they are using still to this day, they use Spexy's trainings to be able to facilitate the conversation for the next meeting, right? Okay. Which is really great. Okay. So, the doctor sends me an email and he says, hey, I just wanted to let you know that I have been doing this for, I think it's like 12 years or something like that. And he's like, I have been doing the measurement system for the boxing method for the A/B sizing of the lenses. I've been doing it wrong. And he goes, I thought back to where I learned that. And I learned it from the other optometry practice that I was learning in, from the doctor and the optical manager that were working there. So they've been doing the whole boxing system around for the lenses wrong for decades.
Wow.
Finding out the effective diameter and everything else. So, nearly decades, over a decade. So the reality is that these types of things here's a doctor who has a multi-million-dollar practice, right? Very successful. He's very proud of his training with his team. He goes, I went and looked it up. Sure as all get out, I'm wrong.
Wow.
So those types of things where there's so many different variables in our industry that can get lost in translation.
Yeah.
And maybe, it very well could be that, maybe they were trying to teach, his predecessor was trying to teach this great method, and either maybe he was training it right and maybe this doctor just didn't know.
Yeah.
Or maybe the predecessor taught it wrong. But the reality is that here he is, 12 or so years later, now taught his entire team and went, oh gosh, dang it.
That's wrong.
Well, I'm so thankful for Spexy because who knew?
Yeah. Well,
and I'm sure the lab was really happy because the lab probably hated the darn guy.
and maybe his rebacks are all coming down now, and there's a whole other positive side of things that are happening.
Right.
Stay connected by subscribing to The Focused View and visiting our website, www.thefocusedview.com.au, for additional resources and episode summaries. We look forward to your company again in our next episode. Until then, keep focused. I'm Michael Nasser. Bye for now.